Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Miles, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Listen, um, shout out to Financial Independence for Blacks, a great meeting today talking about financial literacy for African Americans, people of color. You know, it's so important, brothers and sisters, these times that we're looking at a potential recession and some economic drawback. I think it's really important that we begin to understand the aspect of finance and how we, brothers and sisters, can get on the other side of it. When I say the other side of it, I mean ahead of the curve and looking at trends, opportunities, and options of whereby we can invest money as well as grow our financial fortunes. That said, today's show is, what does the concept of fair mean these days? Now, we've been through a fairly turbulent time. Let me say that. We've been in a very turbulent time. And in this space of turbulence, the question has been revisited. Part of Jews 6 is interesting because it asks about the concept of fairness. Why is it that people will go to other folks, they'll go to their Lord looking for understanding of fairness, not necessarily looking for it, but looking for a concept of it that benefits themselves? When all around you, you have all of these outstanding examples of fairness, justice, and equality. I thought we would delve into that today because Jude 6 does really talk about that. The aspect of equality, but also egalitarianism. Where is it in our society that we've lost it in this society? I saw an interview with Oprah Winfrey and former President Barack Obama. And they talked about this scope, and President Obama meant this. He said this. He said one of the aspects of America these days is that the loss of that center, the loss of a perception of fairness here in America affects us around the world. Like, that loss allows everyone else to be, in some regards, removed from the responsibility and accountability of fairness. That said, I said, man, this is just an amazing thought process because even in that space, I want to make sure, even in that space, it is a problem because we're raising generations behind us who will not experience the full complement of fairness in their lives, in their jobs, in their relationships. Unfortunately, we are turning out youth that are very handicapped, and we see the outgrowth of the pressure of these handicaps. We have high child suicide rates. We have these school shootings. We have people who are constantly in a state of rage. Over and over and over and over again, it is the absence or perceived absence of justice, solutions, peacemaking, conflicts, in terms of conflict resolutions, that somehow leave people in an abyss. Whether it's financially, whether it's spiritually, whether it's emotional, we are leaving people in an abyss. And the question is, what is fairness? What does the idea of fair mean these days? Myself, when I was raised, the concept of fairness, let's be honest, that it was two types of fairness. There was the fairness that you gave and you shared with God, and then there was the fairness that other people who weren't God tried to give you. Clearly, we knew who we valued in terms of fairness, and that created, of course, a certain type of dissonance that a lot of people couldn't understand. The meritocracy of having belief in faith, and your actions are ordered by that belief in faith, as opposed to people telling you and making up the rules along the way. Justice in America is a balance of, are we going to have an ethic that is framed around being fair? The existence of African Americans, other people of color, but specifically African Americans in the United States, is that the whole idea of being fair has always been a systematic, or I want to say a metaphor of constantly moving the goalposts. So it's never a full fair. It's a kind of fair here, a quarter here, kind of fair, welfare. It was all these type of things that fundamentally drove people, particularly our people, to establish institutions. My only regret is in establishing these institutions, at some point in time, we always went back to ask the people who weren't fair to us, can you be fair to us? Is this fair? There's a video of Imam Worthy Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, and he talks about this notion, this romanticism of fairness that we have from people who don't want to be around us, of people who don't see of us value, They don't see a value. They don't see of consequence. They don't see of a character. But we constantly want to be around these people talking about fair. Well, today, brothers and sisters, we're going to hop into it. We're going to talk about fair here on the Shout Out Show. Buckle up because we're ready to go. Satana, let's roll. SOS.
We just need help.
Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Muslim Family Services at your command. The people who help people have to say, we need your donations, don't delay. We all have struggles from time to time, but leaders dedicated is what you find. Before another person sheds a tear, support Olive Branch, you don't have to fear. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Sing it with me. Ooh. Ooh.
Shout out, of course, to Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Shout out to our sponsor this month, Islamic Relief USA. You know, before I get into this, let me tell you where I'm coming from. This whole idea of fair. I'm watching grown politicians that represent us, who literally carry in the balance how we live our lives through legislation, how we are to get our food, how we are to protect ourselves, have clean water, electricity, how are we to deal with our taxes. And it had to do with the confirmation of Sister Ketanji Brown. There's a thing going around, very popular, on Instagram, and it shows all of these Republicans talking about how qualified this woman was, that she was a great judge, that she was a great legal mind, and in the end they would go, but I'm not going to vote for her. And there's this cascade of people going, she's wonderful, she's great, she's all these things, but I'm not going to vote for her. And I said, if there wasn't a majority of senators to vote for her, that she would not be elected a Supreme Court judge. And in my heart, it said, well, is that fair? You know, a lot of us, we don't talk about it. It's sort of like the trauma that we carry as African Americans and other people of color, but specifically African Americans. And I'm going to say above African Americans, women, particularly Black women, carry this scope of waking up every day and you know that the world is not fair. That the misnomer is somehow you're just supposed to deal with it and not only strive and struggle, but somehow you're supposed to be successful meeting up to the standards that are set out there, the standards that automatically tell you, hey, the game is rigged, it's not fair. Over and over and over, you keep seeing these things play out in terms of themes over and over and over. You know, they just had a person who was not acquitted as a part of the January 6th insurrection, the first person who was found innocent. Now, I'm looking at this and I say, why are we even in this process? Why are we even talking about this process, you know, some years and months later, that we clearly saw a violation of law? I'm an African-American man. Listen, I've been pulled over because a policeman told me at one point in time that he saw me on my cell phone texting and driving. It didn't happen, but it was just the fact that because he had the badge and the gun, he could make that case in court. Because when you go in court, the people who are the jury are already rigged to believe the law officer, not you. So we're going to talk about what does the concept of fair mean to these days. Before we get into it, please, Sultana, let's welcome in our illustrious Shout Out Show family. We got Sister Ree. What's going on? She said, hello, family. Hello to you, Sister Ree. Hope all is well. Peace and blessings to you and the family. Thank you again for your participation, your support. Sister Ree. Next up, Altaf Rashid, better known as Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down, a Canadian ambassador to the show. I'm going to tell you something. Whenever I go to Canada, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, you know what I feel when I get that go across the border? I feel a sense of fairness. I feel a little fair. Like there's so much diversity that you can't really tip it to anybody. So someone has an advantage. So there's a innate feeling of fairness when you go across the border, and people are free. You know, we live our lives here in the United States, and there's this burden on our shoulders that said, you know what, the game is rigged. It's not fair, and yet we still achieve. But we're going to get back to that a little bit later. Next up, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother Rashid, brother Altaf, appreciate you. Johnny L. Thomas, my main man, what's going on, beloved? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're gearing down, man. I hope you're getting in your fast. I meant to ask you about it, but I'm happy, man. I'm in a good space and I have good energy. Shout out to you, Yolanda, Justin, and Jordan, and Miss Maisie, and Miss Mamie, and Sister Eunice, and Sister Vivian, and Brother Edwin. I know them all, brothers and sisters. All right, man. Wa alaikum assalam, man. Good to see you on the show. Tune in. Talk about what is the concept of fairness these days. And my brother, Bilal Salahuddin, grandfather to 9 children. What's going on, beloved? Peace and blessings to you and sister Sonia. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for the show. Representing the SOS. Yes, indeed. Next up, we got. Okay. I think my sister froze. We're going to give her a shout out. We're going to give a shout out to Sister Satana, working the ones and twos in the back. I think she froze, but it's all right. She will probably pop back in. This happens when you do live shows and you're working these cloud-based programs, but shout out to StreamYard. You've been stepping up your game lately, so I appreciate you. So let me get into this whole idea of how I come into talking about fair. You know, when I was a kid, and many of us know this, we grew up in integration in the 60s and 70s. Inherently, you had loving parents who protected you because they told you that what you're going to go through in life, beginning at 4, 5, 6 years old, as you get out and you engage in the world, they inherently told you in a very, very loving way that the world was not fair. But what they did is they made it general by saying life isn't fair. But what they wouldn't say is your life is not going to be fair compared to other lives. And through that process, we could either do one or two things. So you can get better, you can get bitter. I found the important part to get better in this process, but it only comes from understanding why I would be bitter, why I would be perceived as different. And from a child point of view, it's kind of menial. But when you watch people that you love go through a process where they are demeaned, where they are denied, where they are derided, by virtue of the fact that people have the space and the authority to do so, not the moral correctness, not even political correctness, in many cases, not even legal correctness, but the fact that there's a culture that supports this whole scope of unfairness. Many of us will make the case, hey, as Muslims, this is unfair. But before the case of Muslims was made, you had an entire legacy of people who excel, people who develop education, people who develop religion, business, and philosophy and art under the auspices that the world was not fair. So what is the concept of fair today? Literally, we become numb watching people take advantage of laws that weren't fair, take advantage of opportunities in business that weren't fair, take advantage of lies and profit. And it is a point, brothers and sisters, I would say that even sometimes you can become disheartened, You know, Jude 6 said something really, really interesting. He said, why do people And I guess the question is almost a lot saying, why do you come to me looking for fairness when I provided fairness in creation? To get to me at this point, you have to observe and be knowledgeable of fairness. It's the same concept of a disbeliever. A disbeliever becomes a disbeliever, but only by the fact that they come into contact with something that they believe and then disbelieve. I would say fundamentally it's the same thing about being fair. That people understand fair, and understand fair gives them the premise to be unfair. And the question now is, are we romanticizing this concept of being fair when life, and I would say that the evidence around us says that there's a clear permeation of the fact that we've developed a culture that is systemically not fair. So we can do all the marching that we want to, we can do all the protests that we want to, but the spirit of the law says that we are going to be unfair. Case in point, while you were asleep, that should be another section. Satana, remember this. We should have a while you were asleep section, maybe once a week. While you were asleep, the Supreme Court, the one that's just run the course, I won't even say the Supreme Court had the autonomy to repeal many of the safeguards that gave us fresh water, that dealt with how people deal with their trash and pollution. They just repealed that 5-4, and nobody knows about it. And you say, is that fair? That 9 judges, 5 out of 9 judges can make a rule that is irreparable to our economy, irreparable to our ecosystem, and yet we still have to deal with it because somehow we've given them the preeminence of law that they can somehow, better than any of us, understand and interpret the law. But it is only man's law that they can only interpret. There's no spiritual law. There's no God law. There's no God's law. But we have these people, and we are beholden to a system that is inherently fair. I mean, inherently unfair. Over and over and over and over again. We've talked about this. And I'm saying this because I looked at a young man earlier today while I was out. I looked at a young man earlier today while I was out. And I saw him ask about a job. And they told him that they weren't hiring. But when I was taking my stuff, I heard people laughing about this young man. They were hiring, but they didn't want to hire him. That somehow from his appearance, they derived that he was not going to be a good employee, or he had bad character, or maybe he was going to steal. Somehow they made all of these inferences from that man. And the killer part is maybe he didn't want to interview that day. Maybe he just wanted an application. And he can come back with his application and he can dress appropriately for an interview. But they denied him that, brothers. This is in an effort, in an action that was inherently unfair. You know where I'm going with this. We'll be back. This is the Shout Out Show. Let's go ahead and run our commercial. Assalamu alaikum. Hey, babies. Welcome to Radio WCUC, Convenient Urgent Care, home of the smart patient. This is DJ What It Do. You know what time it is. It's the top of the hour, and the request lines are open. You know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Operators are waiting.
I just gotta hear "Don't Get the COVID."
Don't get the COVID. Put your mask back on. The Delta COVID, more contagious than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get the vaccine. You know that it can keep you safe, and your people living up in your space. Don't get the COVID. You need to wash your hands. The Delta COVID is more deadly than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get your vaccine. You know that it can keep you from dying. Don't leave your family all alone and crying. Don't get the COVID. We invite you to join our fight against COVID and against misinformation. It's time to listen to the doctors and trust the science. When I think of people dying that don't have to die, it makes me sad. Now's the time to be sober. Together we can make this thing over. Let's fight the COVID. Convenient urgent care, home of the smart patient.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. I wanted to bring my love and joy and support to Islamic Relief during this Ramadan season. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you.
Let us salute Islamic Relief USA for living up to the calling of this holy month, helping local organizations, providing food security, health care, and financial assistance to struggling communities and resettled refugees.
Our Muslim American community has been on the front lines in Florida's 9th Congressional District and other areas of the nation to help us recover.
I'm grateful for all the work they are doing in my district and around the world.
Islamic Relief USA is constantly working together for a better world.
Your charitable efforts to help reduce hunger, educate refugees, and assist survivors of domestic abuse embody the noble values that are honored in Ramadan.
Your work to put the Muslim values of community and charity into action has helped not only provide food, but also healthcare, financial assistance, and many more hit hardest by this pandemic.
Islamic Relief USA and the Muslim American community in my district have lived those values to the fullest these last 2 years.
Thank you to Islamic Relief USA for the work you do to lift the voices of Muslims all around the world.
As we continue to fight for a more just and more tolerant world, I am honored to be your partner in Congress.
It's this community care that binds us as a global human family.
We are better for all that you have contributed and the difference that you make.
I wish you and all of my Muslim brothers and sisters a blessed month of peace and spiritual renewal.
May peace and love be brought upon you. Ramadan Mubarak.
Shout out to Islamic Relief. Got some extras in the building. Let's go ahead and get them up. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We hope that I can put a bow around this because it's something that bothers me. You know, it's something that bothers me. And I have to say, it's probably something that bothers most of you. I have this thing about when people say something is fair, but really it's only fair for them. It's like being a part of a race, if you will. Like someone says, we're going to line up on the line and we're going to race. But they tell me when the man says go, you have to wait 2 minutes before you start running. And the person turns around and they get to the finish line. They go, hey, I won. I'm like, but the rules said for it to be fair, according to you, that I had to wait 2 minutes. I'm never going to win that race. And then on the other side, if people don't even have understanding or clarity or context for what happened, they're just going to automatically think that I'm slow or I haven't worked out or I'm out of shape. And I think this is the thing that bothers me because even today, with all the social media, with all of the laws and that, we have not come to the context or the reality that this is inherently a place that is not fair anymore. We constantly see an assault on the idea of fair. You can't even vote anymore. There are no fair elections anymore. Fair business practices are out of the window. I just told you this just in. The ecology, the climate is under attack here in the United States because the judges repealed all of the safeguards that have been here for over 50 years. And then the killer part is, and anybody can jump in on this. The killer part is when the rubber meets the road, like with the COVID, and the COVID says, I'm going to kill everybody fairly. You now have a delineation of who should deserve the best health care, who should get the vaccines, who should be able to go these different places, who should be able to go to work. And we're still under this auspices of falsehood, false fairness, and it's going on and on and on and on. We have a problem, brothers and sisters. And maybe the problem is the rational, logical, moral. I didn't say morally correct. I'm just talking about moral as a principle, knowing right and wrong of things. That we now have a society that does not value that. And on the other side, we have a society that suppresses the people who do hold those things as dear and important core values. Two things, and then I'm going to wrap up. Years ago, my grandfather told me that this society was not fair. He gave it as a pretext to tell me how I would learn how to work in an unfair society. And here what he said is you will develop mechanisms and instruments in your mind and your heart and your ability that will create fairness in the spaces where you are. And you will learn not to go to spaces that are not fair. 2, he also said that this process that I would go through, many other people had gone through before me. He said the thing that drove the needle on fairness is that they all sought excellence despite their condition. That excellence is the balance for fairness. Excellence is the cure for those who don't want to deal with you being fair, because excellence puts into a very, very open argument that you can't do what I do, despite the fact you have an advantage. That this thing is so organic and new that it scares you. You'd rather suppress it. They didn't want black people to vote. Who do you think came up with souls to the polls? White people? Hell no. It's black folk. The same way as Moses got his people away from Pharaoh, it's the same thing now. So if you're going to take something from Jude 6, because I know we have a little reflection on Jude 6, it's the fact, brothers and sisters, that the quotient is calling to fairness. And it puts in a very, very picturesque and vivid visibility the idea that we are surrounded by hypocrites who fake fairness, who fake devotion, who fake love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who fake love of you. And in that fakeness, they figure that this is fair, that this is due justice, that this is the way it's supposed to be done. So when you work hard and somebody says, give me your week's pay, they stick you up, that in their mind and their heart, the hypocritical heart, that somehow this is fair. Or seeming fair-minded. That's another term. Maybe the thing that's lacking, brothers and sisters, is discernment. Discernment. That we have to look at who and what we engage in and judge them for what they are, good, bad, and in between. But not putting it in the hands of other folks, not putting it in the hands of people who would harm us, people who would do us dirty. I wish I had the video, if you will, of Imam Warthi Muhammad talking about pimps. And he said the secret of a pimp is to find a woman and entice her to the point that she loves you, but you reject her and she has no rational reason for why she's rejected. The same thing with men. You reject a man for no rational reason and you make it think that it's their fault. It's the cruelest of the cruel. It is diabolical and demonic. And even in that space, brothers and sisters, we still have a mercy that allows us to see ourselves as fair. Shout out my man Yusuf Abdul Jalil, my brother, black man. I hope he's back in California safely, back in New York. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Ramadan Mubarak, brother. So, me and Miss Eleanor say hello to the SOS family. Talking about family, what's going on? Let me shout out, of course, the sisters.
the Bopsy twins. Hope y'all are doing well. And we got Salim, my main man, Salim. How you doing? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak. I hope you don't mind me on this rant about, what do we do about fair today? What is the concept of fair? Maybe we'll take a shout out show segment, and we'll do a whiteboard of what we think fair is, what it looks like. Okay, so listen, that's my time. You guys have been great. Please continue to support us on the Ramadan 30 for 30. We need you. We appreciate you. I will not hold you anymore. I'm gonna be brief. Satana, we're not even gonna run the ad today. We're just gonna fade to black because these people have been so patient. I'm Preacher Mars. This is SOS. See you tomorrow, inshallah.